podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Hello everyone and welcome to How We're the Podcast. It's Gav and you join us the morning after Sunderland's win away at West Bromwich Albion in the Championship. Another victory, another clean sheet. We are on the road to the playoffs and we are going to talk all about that today. First and foremost, with me is Martin Wanless. Hello, mate.
Hello, Gav. Hi, it's nice to have another win to talk about, isn't it?
Absolutely, we love wins. And also with us, making his debut on this iteration of the podcast, is the Sunderland Echo's Phil Smith. Morning, mate.
Morning, everyone. How are we doing?
Yeah, good. Sorry for getting out your scratcher this early. It is just gone 8 o'clock on Sunday morning. You're fueling up on coffee there. I've already had 2 to try and get me going.
To be fair, this is probably my most productive time of the week. It doesn't look like it. Most people can't see me. But yeah, no, I'm usually busy Sunday mornings, so that's no problem. Pleasure to be with you.
Nice. Were you there yesterday? I presume you were.
Yes, I was. Yeah.
Nice day, wasn't it? It was. I mentioned this on our reaction pod. Nice to see the sun shining and the fans celebrating an early afternoon win. I mean, it was a good day, wasn't it? All things considered, I think we had to battle for the victory, but it was a good outing for people who made the trip there because it was a crap early start. 12:30 kick-off. They're not great for the away fans.
And they're not, and especially when it's not even the main game on Sky. I think that's when it makes it doubly. It just seems like, I know obviously that the money is really good for the clubs, especially the League One and League Two clubs. But when you're not even the main game, it feels quite tough to take. But I do think the Hawthorns is like one of, if not my favourite, away to do. I felt like when I was a fan, even before I started doing this job, it's got such a nice blend between being like a beautiful old ground, but not being absolutely dreadful in terms of facilities. So it's always what I look forward to. And we always win there now, which is a new thing that we've started doing, a new Sunderland development. We always seem to win at the Hawthorns. So, it was, I imagine it was a good away trip. I think it was one of those where it wasn't like a brilliant, fluid performance, but I think watching the way the players put their body on the line, especially the sort of last-ditch defending was a real treat. And I think really good after the last away game, which was Coventry, wasn't it? It was nice to see that kind of spirit back, if you like, I think. And that certainly left me reassured, sort of looking ahead to the inevitable playoff campaign.
Yeah, we've certainly responded well, haven't we, Martin, after the international break. We've 2 clean sheets, 2 victories. As Phil said, the type of away performance we maybe haven't seen from this team this season, I think. We haven't seen many of these anyways. I remember Luton early in the season was a bit like this, where we had to really dig in and graft. But it was timely, I would say, because when you go into a playoff campaign, the first leg will hopefully be away from home. That's sort of how you would expect.
Yeah, look, I think it was a perfect away game for us in a lot of respects.
Through it. So
coming off the back,
it was a good dress rehearsal for what's maybe to come, I would say.
One sort of played out, and the question mark was always going to be how we responded after that Coventry defeat and after the international break. And, both the Millwall game and the game against West Brom yesterday, I don't necessarily think we've been at our absolute best in terms of how we played football. I don't think we've been, 100% in terms of how we played. But where we have been absolutely spot on is the character. As Phil said, bodies on the line towards the end. And I think we've looked really mentally switched on since that Coventry game and since that little break. So, it's a good win for us, but it plays into our hands a little bit, I think, because West Brom are the type of team that want to dominate the ball. The West Brom fan that you had on with Johnny before the fixture was describing how they want to play football and they want to dominate possession. They want to try to take the game to us, and I think that's where we excel, really. And if you're looking at the playoff campaign, you imagine teams are going to do that more than perhaps other teams would. And, some of the games that we've struggled in recently have been perhaps against teams who haven't wanted the ball and, have wanted us to dominate possession and come at them a bit. And I think sometimes that's where we've maybe struggled a little bit. But no, look, good win, a good win against somebody who, could well be in the playoffs at the end of the season. I think they're struggling a little bit at present, aren't they? But, you wouldn't be surprised if Tony Mowbray got them into the playoffs, and then it's a fairy tale football story for him to take a team up to the Premiership Premier League this season after everything he's been through. So, look, I think it's a good confidence booster. Clean sheet, I think, importantly. A couple of goals from set pieces in the last couple of games, which we haven't had too many of this season. So, look, I think it's, there's an awful lot of positives to take out of it.
Yeah, was the win and the clean sheet all that mattered in the end, you think, Phil? Because a lot of people were not particularly happy with how we played. But as Martin said, I agree, and I said this yesterday, that I think whilst, we all want to see Sunderland play this silky style of football and batter teams 3 and 4-0, I think by this stage, after 40 games, we've realised that's just not in our makeup at the minute. So was that all that really mattered, that we just got the victory, the clean sheet, move on, gather a bit of momentum?
I think it was more important than the performance. I think the two, which Martin's kind of alluded to there, I think if you're looking ahead to what really matters now, which is the playoffs, I think the two big things that you take from that game is the way that Sunderland were able to absorb pressure. And I think most importantly, the way they were able to actually manage the game later on, because from what I can remember, Patterson made a decent save, one you'd expect him to make probably about 15 minutes from the end. And I don't remember West Brom having a shot after that. So seeing the way Sunderland were able to actually manage the game, Lebris made the point in his post-match press conference afterwards that we might have dropped points in a game like that 3-4 months ago, because that was obviously something that was happening. So I think that's the big positive. I think we probably have to have that balance as well, though, in saying that attacking-wise, I mean, we were quite a long way off. Even if you sort of say that we're best without the ball, usually we're very, very good counter-attacking, and we weren't yesterday, especially the first half. It was a lot of you could see what the plan was, and it kind of made sense. West Brom have not the quickest back line. They're getting high up the pitch, and I could understand the plan to try and sort of spring Isidore clear, but the quality was pretty poor. And, we have to acknowledge as well that the free kick should never end up in the back of the net. It's a real goalkeeping. Listen, Hume puts it in the right area, doesn't he? And that's all you can ask of a player in that position, so that's great. But I think we can take a lot of positives away from the discipline and the commitment and structure. I have to say that I'm slightly concerned about, our counter-attacking play in that game, because usually, yes, you're fine with someone not having the ball because you know how dangerous we can be counter-attacking, and we looked well off it yesterday. So I can kind of see the concern a little bit. I don't think we should get too carried away with the level of performance, because I think that there has to be a lot more gears for someone to go through. But I do think the most important thing, really, when you think about the fact that we might have to go to Middlesbrough or Coventry or West Brom or whoever it is, to see the players almost prove to themselves that they can absorb that pressure and they can defend their box when they need to. Hopefully it's going to stand us in really, really good stead.
Yeah, I think particularly in that second half, Martin, the play, once we got out, we were defending brilliantly. We had that bit sorted, but once we got out, we didn't seem to hold on to the ball well enough. The ball was getting into midfield and it was coming straight back, or we were trying to go along to Mayenda or Isidore or Rig, and it was just coming straight back the other way because they had two bruisers at the back who could head the ball. And that was, if I was going to be critical, I think that would be the bit I'd focus on, would be that our outlet wasn't there. Normally it is the counter-attack, and as Phil said, that's been a crucial part of our makeup as a team this season, when we've, especially away from home, when we've played against teams who want to dominate the ball, we've then been really effective going the other way. And that was lacking yesterday, wasn't it?
Oh, I think even if you look at the stats, our passing success percentage was pretty poor, really, wasn't it? And it's funny, like in the first half, it was 2 or 3 times where I think Rig had the ball and he was trying to spring Isidore or Mayenda, and the passes just weren't quite right. So we were kind of getting in a decent position to play that ball through on a number of occasions, but we didn't quite get it right. But we didn't look after the ball well enough, and I think Lebris kind of commented on that after the game in his interview, didn't he? He said, we weren't looking after the ball, we weren't controlling the game when we could control it. But all of that being said, in the second half, Lefebvre comes on, he puts Isidore through, and 10 or 15 minutes earlier, I think Isidore probably scores that. Yeah. And that it's a quality of the through ball, and I think Lefebvre coming back hopefully gives us a bit more. Well, he does give us a bit more quality if he's fit, and hopefully over the next 2 or 3 games we'll see him getting a bit more game time, so he hits those maybe last 3 games ready to start for the playoff campaign. But, you had that Isidore chance. Mayenda, for mine, when he should have had a penalty. I think that was a nailed on penalty. So we could have been talking about a 3-0 win. In a lot of respects, which would have completely flattered us, because as I said earlier, I think a draw probably would have been a fair result on performance. But look, again, I think there's those bits of the game that we absolutely need to work on. We need to get better at ahead of this run-in and playoff campaign, unless we win all the games and Leeds keep dropping points and stuff. But you never know. It's Sunderland.
Yeah.
But look, plenty to work on. But I think the biggest thing for me out of this last couple of games is the mental attitude. And I needed, I think Phil mentioned the word reassurance before. I needed some reassurance that this wasn't all going to go and fizzle out to shit in the last few weeks of the season. And I think we look really switched on. So yes, we need to fine tune some stuff on the actual footballing side of things. But I think mentally, the vast majority of people are driving in the same direction for the run-in and what lies ahead.
Yeah, one thing which obviously is of concern coming out the game, Phil, is that injury to Romain Mundle. On the reaction pod we did yesterday, me and Chris kind of brushed it off and said, he looked okay when he came off. He walked off, and when he was with the physio, it didn't look too bad. But you obviously spoke to the manager after the game. What was your impression given what he gave away? Because I know he didn't give away much, but I mean, what do you reckon?
Yeah, I'm loath to speculate too much, but I have to say the early signs weren't great. It's the same hamstring, and the fact that Meander was ready to come on within seconds really of Mundle going down is never a great sign. You tend not to get good news on hamstrings. Hopefully this will be the exception. So the honest answer is I don't know yet, but the early signs are not great. Which it's a massive blow really. I think all the positives from the game are balanced out by that, because we keep talking, don't we, about the end goal here being those playoff games. And listen, fingers crossed the news isn't as bad. But the thing about the schedule now is, even if it's not as bad as you first think, obviously, even only missing a few weeks, you miss so much game time and it leaves you so tight, doesn't it, to get back to the playoffs. So Labrise has got another press conference tomorrow ahead of the Norwich game, so we'll have a kind of full answer then. But that is a massive worry for me coming out of the game, to be fair.
And obviously it comes at a time when we've just learned Tommy Watson's leaving the club in the summer, and you noticed in the changes he made yesterday, Watson wasn't even considered to come on. And again, it throws up an interesting conundrum, Phil, doesn't it? Because ordinarily you would be looking at Tommy Watson and going, well, he would replace Mundle in the pecking order. But now that he's leaving, I mean, it feels as though he's sort of a last resort, and that's going to have to come up. If Mundle's going to be out for a while, or at least till the end of the season and maybe back for the playoffs, we don't know. We don't have timescales. Does he then come back into the thinking, do you think? Or do you think we've got enough?
I think he has to. I mean, I think if Labrise is of the mind that he'd rather... I did say to Labrise afterwards, would Watson have come on if he hadn't basically agreed to join Brighton in the week? And, whether you believe him or not, he said no. He said Eliza's really unfortunate not to be in the team. He's the player who can consider himself most unlucky not to be playing. And to be fair, I thought Meander was really good yesterday in terms of he didn't see a lot of the ball, but invariably when he did get it, he made something happen. He obviously won the free kick for the goal. Whether he should have had a penalty or not, he certainly shouldn't have been booked for diving, because it was absolutely not a dive. That was a really, really poor decision. Every time he got the ball, he made something happen. So that, I think, to be fair to Labrise, that was it. That tactical change, if you like, really paid off. But I find it quite hard to imagine that we can realistically, if we're serious about someone getting promoted, go until the end of the season without using Watson. And if that's as an impact substitute rather than starting games, then fine. But I think realistically, he's going to have to be involved if Mundle is out for a period of time, because, at times Meander is going to have to be used up front, because we talk about managing the squad. Isidore's not going to play 90 minutes every single game until the end of the playoffs, is he? So I think realistically, Watson is, going to have to be used. But I think that, Meander's the man in possession now if Mundle is out, and rightly so. I think you'd struggle to find a Sunderland fan who would say that he doesn't deserve that opportunity, even if it's not his best position. But I thought he made a really, really good fist of it yesterday. He didn't look out of place at all. I thought he was really efficient. Every time he got the ball, he made something happen. So I think he's a quality player, Meander. Great attitude. I think his development's been one of the highlights of the season for me.
Yeah, and obviously we've got Enzo Lefebvre back, Martin. So he tags in, Mundle tags out again, which is frustrating, isn't it? But how do you see that situation then with Mundle? Let's just say he's going to be out for a little while. I mean, how much of a blow is that? Because we haven't got much time left, and he is our best left winger, isn't he? So it's going to be difficult navigating it without him, I would say.
It's a massive blow because, yes, he's our best left winger, but he offers stuff that we actually don't have anywhere else in the squad in terms of that direct raw pace. He can cut inside. He's got a great shot on him, as we saw the other day in the game. Was it Preston, wasn't it, where he scored the goal of the season? So he's just got something that we actually don't have anywhere else in the squad. So I think that's a massive, massive blow. But I completely agree with Phil. I think it will naturally end up that we see more of Tommy Watson than we would have. I still actually think he's going to be third in the pecking order, if not fourth, for a starting place on the left-hand side. I think Mayenda will come in and start there on Tuesday. What I'm interested in with that, because it's not his best position, is it? But he can do a job out there, and he deserves a place in the team, or he deserves a chance in the team because he's been superb this season. But Isidore came with a reputation of being somebody who plays from the left, and I would just be interested to see if we actually start even switching them during the course of the game to give the opposition something to think about, because I think Isidore's struggling a little bit to really get into the game, And yes, look, you look at his stats all season, he doesn't tend to get involved in the game that much, but he was contributing goals in that spell. And now he's got 6 or 7 games without a goal now?
7 games.
Which, that's a worry going into the last stage of the season, because, you want your striker to be in form. And I just wonder whether we actually have a better chance of him playing himself back into form if he actually comes in from the left. And I'd be keen to see that, even if it's for 10 or 20 minutes in like during a game, just to give the opposition something else to think about. Because I think Mayenda's a lot better playing through the middle, because he actually adds something to the press more than Isidore potentially does. But I think what we'll probably end up seeing in 3 or 4 games' time, barring any other injuries, is Lefebvre coming back in on that left-hand side. I think really that's going to be the natural thing. I think my thinking was with Lefebvre coming back that he'd probably take Riggs' position just for that last little bit. But I actually think now, with a hamstring, I'd be surprised if we see Mundle again this season. Even if it's not too bad, it's going to be 2 or 3 weeks out, and they're not going to really want to risk him, especially given it's a recurrence or it's a problem with the same hamstring. As he had an injury with before. So I think Lefebvre will come in on the left-hand side, and, he did a good job out there when he came in. So, it's not a bad replacement to have.
No. What do you make of that suggestion then, Phil, that maybe you could try Isidore on that left-hand side and put Mayenda through the middle? Because Martin's right, he came in with that reputation. Yeah. And I've said this all week. I think at the minute, in my mind anyways, I think Mayenda is the better of the two in terms of the way the season's going. I think he suits us better, but we have to try and play Isidore back into form. What do you reckon of that? Do you think the manager would even consider it? Because it's not really been a consideration so far.
No, at face value, I would say no, because we had this conversation quite a bit earlier in the season when Mayenda was first starting to when he came back from that injury, and it became clear that he'd just gone to another level as a player. And Lebris was like absolutely dead against it, really, just in terms of saying that, Isidore's style is perfect to play through the middle in this league. He's been so good for us. I don't want to change it. Having said that, it's a slight tangent, but I think it's the same point. I was asking him after the game yesterday about playing Job as the sort of deepest line midfielder and pushing Neil forward, and he said, well, they both had a long season. I just thought it would be good to freshen it up for them, give them a new challenge, and it's good for me to look at different things at the moment, with the potential of playoffs. So in that context, you kind of think, well, why not give Isidore, maybe even if it's in within game? I think that's an interesting one. Can you just switch them for 20 minutes at the end of the first half or whatever? So I think it's definitely something worth considering. But for me, I think you're absolutely right in what you say there, Martin, about Mundle being very unique in what he has. The only player who comes close to that is Watson, in terms of the ability to burst inside onto his right foot to score into the far corner. For me, I don't think it's going to hold to say that we can't really use Watson because he's gone to Brighton. I think he's here. Sunderland made the decision not to let him go in January, because they felt they couldn't lose him until the end of the season. I think they're going to have to use him semi-regularly between now and the end of the season if Mundle is out.
I suppose it's a chance for him to redeem himself in the eyes of people who are maybe doubting him, Martin Watson, if he does get that opportunity. Maybe it's an opportunity he didn't think he was going to get as well. Possibly had this week came to terms with the idea maybe he's not going to play a great deal. All of a sudden, this injury presents him with a massive opportunity. And we've seen these stories play out before. It could be a case of he comes in, he fires us to promotion and rides off into the sunset down to Brighton, and everyone gives him their best wishes. There is that possibility that Watson could feasibly come back in and really contribute, but it's a big ask, isn't it, for a player who's also been injured for quite a while?
Well, look, he's been injured for quite a while, and he is pretty inexperienced, as we were talking about. He's started 7 or 8 games, I think, hasn't he? So it's not as if you're talking about somebody who's played regularly for 3 seasons. Like if it was Jack Clark, for example, you're not talking about somebody like Jack Clark coming back in and using him. So there's still a huge unknown with Watson on the field. The biggest unknown in this scenario is his attitude and how his head is and where his head's at. And I think that will determine how much he actually plays. Because, it could feasibly pan out that he forces himself into the team. Because, look, there's a position available there. And we've talked that my end is probably likely to start on Tuesday against Norwich. But, who knows what happens with form and needing to switch strikers. Because, playing your 2 strikers from the start for a lot of the games doesn't give you the option from the bench to change things up top. But Watson could feasibly come back into the team, get us into the playoffs, get us promoted. And if that's the case, and he plays a good role in that, his stock is considerably higher going to Brighton than it would be if he doesn't make an appearance off the bench for the rest of the season. So, there's a potential opportunity, a potential win for him there in terms of him going to Brighton in the summer in June, where he has played a huge part in these sort of closing stages of the season. So, I think I said when you and I were talking about when the news broke about Watson, essentially it's like having a lone player now. And we've kind of got to use him like that. And ultimately, if he's the best option for a given game, we've kind of got to use him. And, there's no point in cutting your nose off to spite your face and thinking, well, we'll teach him a lesson, we'll leave him off the bench, we're not going to use him. It's pointless. We need to see the bigger picture. And if he is the best option, because, Phil's bang on, Watson is the most like Mundle that we've got. I just think he's kind of got almost less power and, in his play than Mundle has. But in terms of how he cuts inside and he can curl crosses in or curl shots in, he has got that. So it will be really interesting to see how the Briss handles it and how the club handle it. But I think it'll be determined by how Watson's head is, really.
Yeah. And the other side of it, I guess, is if you're Milan Alexic or Eliza Mayenda and you haven't had the opportunities recently, what do you then think if they start playing Tommy Watson ahead of you when you're fully committed to the club? That's the other headache, isn't it? That the Briss would have to contend with.
Well, it is, but it depends what's happening in training. Like we only see a really small part of what's going on, don't we? We see what goes on the field on a Saturday or a Tuesday or Sunday or whenever it is. But on the training field, if Alexic is ripping it up and Tommy Watson's got his head down and not doing it, then that'll tell its own story, won't it? So I think there's so many factors to it, and we only can see 30 or 40% of them. So it'll be determined by, it'll be shown by the selection. But it was telling that even for that time wasting sub at the end yesterday, it's Alexic and not Watson coming on. So I think that tells its own story to some extent.
Yeah, I wanted to talk as well about the fact that obviously we kept a clean sheet, which is fantastic, but it was Anthony Patterson who kept that clean sheet, and he's now got 2, Phil. Obviously came under a lot of criticism recently, hasn't he, for his performances and some of the mistakes he's made in games and stuff. And there was a moment there where I think a lot of people were saying, take him out the team, give him a breather, put Simon Moore in, try and just work with Patterson that way, get him out of the way a little bit like what Leeds have just done with Ilan Millier, who's making mistakes and has been subsequently dropped. But Patterson, they've played him through it, and he keeps 2 clean sheets. And I actually think he played really, really well. I thought, yeah, that was his best game in a long time. There was a couple of hairy moments, when he had the ball at his feet, and there was one which he flapped at a little bit. But generally speaking, I think Anthony Patterson had a good game, and that's, again, another good sign, isn't it, going into a period in the season where we need everyone to be informed that the goalkeeper's starting to get his head around it a little bit.
Yeah, I thought he was exceptionally well protected yesterday. That's not me criticising Patterson, but I think if the performances that I really loved watching yesterday were particularly Hume or Nine Mepham. I thought their desire to head the ball often against players who had an advantage over them in terms of height or strength or whatever was amazing. I think with Patterson, my view on that was always pretty consistent all the way through, and that is there areas of Patterson's game that can be improved? There clearly are. We can all see that. I'm not sure he's kicked on a huge amount this season from where he was the last couple of years. But having said that, having gone up and down, travelling around the Championship, watching all these goalkeepers, he is so much steadier and more consistent than the vast majority of keepers in this league. That's always been my opinion. And I think those high-profile mistakes he made were a real aberration. He doesn't make many of them. And I think yesterday it underlines that, the error that the West Brom goalkeeper made. If we're honest, how often are we talking about Anthony Patterson making that kind of mistake? It's so, so rare, isn't it? I know we did have a sticky patch of a couple of weeks where it was happening a bit more often, but for me, I think Lebris was absolutely right in staying strong on that one, because Patterson is clearly the club's number one, and I think to change it after a couple of errors, albeit, Patterson wasn't in the best form, I think that would have been so destabilising. You see at Leeds how long and how much Farke's agonised over that decision, despite the fact that Meslier has been making regular errors, which Patterson hasn't. I think that would have been a huge error at a key part of the season. And I think you're right. I think that although he's not making loads and loads of saves at the moment, I think you can see that Patterson's really, really steadied. So I think that's a big tick going into the playoff campaign. But I do think yesterday was about the fact that, despite the number of set pieces and balls going into the box, Patterson barely really had a save to make. I think that was testament to Mepham and 09 in particular, and also Trey Hume. I thought their desire yesterday was exceptional. 09 and Mepham in particular, really, really, really quality performance, proper old school centre halves performance. I loved watching it. I thought they were great.
Yeah, the manager was keen to point that out, wasn't he, Martin, after the game in his interview when he was talking about the performance, about how he said something along the lines of, at the end of the game, tactics go out the window and it's about desire and mentality. And we showed a really good mentality to get over the line. But Phil's right. That the standard was set by the centre halves, wasn't it? In particular, I think Chris Mepham, and I said this yesterday, that is probably as well as I've seen him play. Certainly as well as I've seen Mepham play in a little while. Because he's another one who had a little sticky patch there. But I think as a unit, they were absolutely superb.
Oh, they were brilliant. And, we're going to need them to do that for the next few weeks, aren't we? I think you look at West Brom's stats, and they had 20-odd shots in there, but only 3 hit the target. And that shows how frustrated they were getting, how we were limiting the space in front of them, where they were having to take pot shots. And we were restricting angles and all sorts of stuff. But, I think as a partnership, Mepham and 09 have been great all season. I think, Mepham had a bit of a wobble, didn't he? And Ballard came back into the team. And 09 had a little bit of a wobble around sort of New Year, didn't he? But he's come back into form. And, Tony Mowbray after the game was very strong in his praise of 09 as a central defender. He's saying he's a brilliant central defender. And, he's another, he puts his body on the line. He really sets the tone, doesn't he? I think he just set the tone for the whole defence, the whole performance. What I thought was interesting, I think we would, and whether it was by choice or not, I don't know, but we were defending a little bit deeper than we perhaps would normally do. And sometimes when we push up, we actually create that space for Patterson to come and try to claim the ball, which has caused problems on occasion. And I think we kind of restricted that space where West Brom could play the ball into across the box pretty well. So we were kind of getting into really good positions to defend and get our heads on things and get our bodies on things. And look, that comes with its own risks. And we've seen it play out a couple of times this season where we trying to hang on towards the last 5 or 10 minutes and we've conceded a goal, haven't we? But thankfully we restricted them. And, I thought we actually played some of the best football in that last sort of 5-10 minutes of the game. We actually controlled the game really well and saw the game out really well. And I think, even Hielder coming on, I thought he played a part in that because I think he did fantastically well. And I think that's interesting looking ahead to Tuesday as well, because we know Trey Hume's carrying an injury. he played the full game. So whether bringing Brown off was protecting him ahead of Tuesday and Hjelder's going to come in at left back and give Hume a rest on Tuesday, we don't know. But I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case.
Yeah, Hjelder played his part at the end, didn't he? There was an opportunity to cross it and he took it up into the corner, which we've been critical of the team though, Martin, haven't we?
Well, Alexic did it. Alexic against Millwall.
Alexic's done it.
And he went
and Mayenda's done it as well before too.
So no, it was spot on. Look, it showed a really good common sense in terms of how you can manage in that game. And I thought he did well. And it's good. He seems to, you'll have more insight into this, Phil, than me and Gav do, but Hjelder seems to be one of those players who is really popular in the dressing room, but he just seems to love being at the club. And he did a post-match interview with Hume on the club's website, and he's buzzing after having played a 5 or 6 minute cameo or whatever it was. So you need people like that who are ready to step in and roll the sleeves up and go on with it, aren't you?
Everyone loves Hjelder.
Yeah.
Everyone absolutely loves Hjelder. Such a popular figure in the dressing room. I think that, there were opportunities for him to go on loan in January. And I think he was and ahhing because he absolutely loved it here. But I think you can understand as well that he wants to play. And I think he could see Ballard, Mepham, 9 probably understood where he was in the pecking order. But I think LeBrice was really keen for him to stay in it. And in the end, I think Hjelder wanted to be part of this promotion push, if you like. And, LeBrice, he's not... I think you can get from listening to LeBrice, you can see it as well. He's not hugely sort of sentimental, but he loves Hjelder. He thinks he's great. He thinks he's such an important part of the squad. And it's nice as well because I feel like that's the fans are starting to see that now and getting appreciation for that. I was trying to do my reaction video in the press box and I could barely hear myself speak because everyone was singing Leo when he was doing his rundowns. Yeah, warm down. Sorry, that's the phrase I'm looking for. So I think that was like a really nice thing, and that was you could tell how much the fans appreciate the defensive effort yesterday. But yeah, Hjelder's one of those players who we don't always get the understanding from the outside of how important they are. A player who isn't playing much but is at it every day in training, who's supporting the other players, who's we all get a bit wary of the sort of management speak and people talking about culture and stuff like that, and understandably so. But those players really are worth their weight in gold, and I'm pleased he's sort of getting his flowers a little bit at this stage of the season because I think his attitude over what's probably been quite a frustrating season for him is absolutely first class, and I thought he did well yesterday. That's the most important thing. I thought he contributed to the win when he came on.
There's a few people, Phil, after the game talking about how you see the way we've ended or we're starting to end the season, and you see some of the results elsewhere. Obviously, Sheffield United got beat, Leeds dropped points. Leeds have been dropping points for weeks now. There is a feeling in some people of frustration about the way the season's gone, which to me, I mean, up front here, I think we've had a brilliant season. This is about where I would have expected us to be. But they're looking at the results elsewhere and thinking, bloody hell, if we just hadn't dropped points in this game and we just hadn't dropped points in that game, we would be right up there still. What's your view on that, the way the season's actually gone? Because we finished 16th last season. We didn't spend a great deal of money. We're actually in a league of our own, really, just below the 3 teams above us, and everybody else below us is nowhere near. So what's your feeling on how the season's actually gone?
I think it's gone amazingly well and has still managed to be incredibly frustrating in its moments. I'm more of the view that I think with the budget, the size of the squad, I think to be that far clear of Coventry, Middlesbrough, Bristol City, West Brom, that group of teams, I think is a really, really, really good achievement. I don't necessarily think that where we are, I know Sunderland is an absolutely huge club in terms of the fan base and stuff, but the financial realities of the modern game, I'm not sure we necessarily can expect us to be that far ahead of all those teams in the Championship. So I think it's been a brilliant season. And I think for me, having watched it sort of so far, I think the things that have enabled us to do that have also held us back in some ways. So I think that the fact that LeBrice has gone with this really, really small core of players has allowed them to develop a familiarity. It's allowed them to develop this togetherness. And I think that's probably the main reason why we are so far ahead of some of these other teams who sort of maybe player for player aren't too far off us. The flip side of that is we've all seen it at times where the squad has been too stretched, we've been too tired, and we haven't been able to turn up in certain games. I don't personally necessarily look at missed opportunities in terms of individual games. I think the reality is those 3 teams are ahead of us in terms of their overall level. So I think we are where we are. I find it personally quite hard to be critical of that, because I think the financial realities are that I think it's a lot to ask us to compete with some of those teams this season. This summer, and hopefully we're talking about a Premier League team, but if we're not, then it becomes really interesting, isn't it? Because now that you've sold Jack Clark, now that you've already banked the money for Tommy Watson, I think your expectation of where Sunderland should be next season perhaps changes, because surely I think everyone knows how the club wants to operate. And at that point, you're looking at it and going, well, are we looking at the next calibre of player up now? So I think if we didn't go up, I think this summer would be really, really interesting. But I think pound for pound for me, I think it's been a brilliant season. I think Labrise has done an outstanding job, in my opinion. Probably some of the things he's done really well have had their drawbacks as well. But I think the points tally that Sunderland have got this season is really impressive. That's certainly my view on it.
Yeah, you kind of hinted at it before, Martin, but we are 8 points off Sheffield United in second with 6 games to go. It would be I know there's a part of us thinks, what if? But I think it's going to be.
The odds are pretty high, aren't they? The odds will be good for it.
Yeah, I mean, as long as that carrot is dangling, though, what do you think? Do you think that's something we should still aspire to?
You know what? It's just it's almost a little bit reminiscent of when we got into the playoffs on that last day of the season a couple of years ago, and we went on that run where we just kind of seemed to just get wins somehow in most games that we turned up and played. Like the West Brom game I referenced before, where Certain got a couple of goals, we somehow just managed to win, and we kind of seemed unstoppable in that running because we had the momentum into it. And regardless of whether these last 6 games leave us 4th, 3rd, or 2nd, we're going to need that momentum going into any playoff campaign that happens after that, aren't we? So I just think I think we're actually in a really, really good position, and I'd actually, I'd rather, in some respects, obviously, I'd rather we had a better chance of automatic promotion. So that's one. I'd rather be in Leeds' position or Sheffield United's or Burnley's. But when you look ahead to a playoff campaign, one of those 3 teams I've just mentioned there are going to be gutted because they've missed out probably on the last day of the season, the way things are shaping up. So one of those teams is going to have that hangover of, shit, we've missed out after, if it's Leeds, can you imagine the feeling around the club after last season as well? So one of those 3 clubs is going to have a major hangover. The other 2 are going to come in with momentum, but they're going to have had a big 6 games here. We can, I know we've kind of talked about it being a mini pre-season in terms of ramping up so we are right on it for that first playoff game, and that's it's a great position to be in because we can get players back to fitness. We're not going to be flogging Lefay, hopefully, over the next 6 games. We're not going to be flogging Isidore. We're going to be able to rotate a little bit. We haven't got the depth of squad to rotate massively. But hopefully everything will build to a nice crescendo. So when that first playoff game comes, everybody's kind of at the peak. And the other clubs don't have that option. And, if we get 5 or 6 wins out of the next 6 games, which, who knows, we could get 1 point or we could get 18 over the next few weeks. You don't know how it's going to play out. But, the more wins that we keep getting, the pressure's off us to a large extent. But, if you win at Norwich on Tuesday, then you win in the home game that we've got coming up after that, and the teams above us have a bit of a jitter and start dropping points, and then, all of a sudden we're only 6 points off second place with 4 games to go, then you start going, it could happen. But I think we're actually in quite a luxurious position because we can just go out and play football. If we win on Tuesday, if we get beat on Tuesday, it's not going to define anything for the outcome of the season because, everyone expects us to be in the playoffs. I think if you got the odds from the bookies about us getting automatics, they'd be bloody good, wouldn't they? It's probably worth a couple of quid. So, we can actually just kind of take it as it comes. And if we get to the last game of the season and there's a little bit of a chance, then brilliant.
Yeah, I've got that.
But I don't think we will. I don't think we will.
I've got that scene from Dumb and Dumber playing in my head. So you tell me there's a chance. No, what do you think then, Phil? I mean, it is a stretch, isn't it, to say we could finish second? But I think Martin's right. I think that should still be, that should still be motivation to keep gathering momentum and at least, get going into the playoffs with a bit of something there, winning games and keeping clean sheets. As long as we keep doing that and the chances there, we should always at least try and aspire to win, I would say.
Yeah, we're going to have to pass the ball a little bit better than we did yesterday if we're going to win 6 games, I think. But no, listen, I think I'm personally, I don't think there's any chance whatsoever, really. But I think that you're right in terms of the mentality. My big hope is that I think, based on the sort of endeavour of the last 2 performances, I think hopefully internally they're over the disappointment of dropping out of the top 2 race. I think that whole Coventry game, it was just a shambles, wasn't it? But you could feel the whole thing had just gone flat, it had gone stale. And I felt like there was probably a bit of a hangover from going from being in the thick of this top 2 race to all of a sudden it looking out. And I think the last 2 performances to me look like there's been a little bit of a reset mentally in terms of, okay, we can still potentially make it, but realistically the top 2's gone. We need to refocus now. We can still get promoted, but we have to be in a good space if we're going to go and do that. So that was the thing for me yesterday. While I wasn't particularly enamoured with the performance generally, I think the mindset and the endeavour of the players suggested to me like they've had that reset and that there's a real level of focus now on getting to the playoffs, if it is the playoffs, in the best possible shape. So I think Martin's right in terms of, I think that's a huge advantage in terms of some other teams might have to go through that process of getting over that disappointment a lot later than we have. And hopefully that can stand us in really good stead. And I think you can already see, we mentioned it, Brown at right back, Joe playing a little bit deeper. I think Lebris is finding little ways to try little bits and bobs, a few different things. And I think that'll continue over the next few weeks. So I do genuinely feel like we're in a pretty good position in terms of that likely playoff campaign.
What's your gut feeling on how this ends then? Because I've asked a few people this recently. Like, obviously, winning games helps us build confidence. But how confident are you about us getting promoted?
I feel, fairly positive. I think that the only team who I feel are an absolutely, definitely better side than us from what I've seen over the course of the season is Leeds, because I think in both games, I think Leeds have been comfortably superior to us. Now, obviously, as Martin mentioned, there's an absolutely fascinating kind of psychological thing going on with them in terms of, despite the fact we can all see they're the best team, watching what's happening to them again and what that mean if they went into the playoffs. But I wouldn't feel particularly confident, is what I'm trying to say, against Leeds, just from the evidence of what we're saying. I don't see any other team who I think that Sunderland should fear. I know there's the thing with Coventry, which I totally get, but that game, there's lots of exceptional circumstances around that game a few weeks back in terms of where the 2 squads were at. And don't forget that we were comfortably better than them at home, and we should have had that game put to bed, really. So I feel pretty positive about Sunderland. I think that, as we saw yesterday, I don't think there's any team in this league other than Leeds who we think are definitely better than us over a 90-minute game. So I feel pretty confident where we're at. The only thing that just makes me stressed is just this constant players just getting injured all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Every week we were joking on our podcast on Monday about, we're finally going to see Mundell, Lefay, Roberts, Isidore, and we kind of said, something will happen, it'll never happen. And then sure enough, literally the next game, Mundell gets an injury. So that's the one thing that makes you worried, doesn't it? Because there are still key positions of the pitch where we're one injury away from you going, what do we do now? Like if Roberts got an injury, if Dan Neil got an injury, if Luke O'Nien got an injury, all of a sudden you're like, oh my word, we have a huge hole in the team now. That's my biggest worry, rather than any opponent necessarily. So I still think, there's a lot of shakeout between now and the end of the season, but I think we should feel sort of quietly confident, personally.
It does bring into question, doesn't it, how much he actually does rotate and just switch things up to prevent that. In any other, do as much as we can to prevent any other injuries happening. Anyway, obviously, most of the ones that you see, you can't do anything to prevent, but you kind of want to manage that workload really well. As I was saying before, isn't it? So we're ramping up, so we're hitting the playoffs in peak fitness, but we haven't got the strength of squad. You look at the bench yesterday, and realistically, there isn't a great deal there to play about with. So it's going to be interesting to see how we actually do it, because while there is still that mathematical chance, he's probably going to be loath to take too many chances.
Yeah. Well, we'll see what happens on Tuesday, and we've got another big game coming up against Norwich. Are you going, Phil? Are you going down for that one?
No, I'm not. I'm not going down for that one. Bristol's my next schlep on my list.
It's a bit of a slap, Norwich, isn't it, on a Tuesday? Like,
yeah. My colleague will be there. My colleague will be there. We'll have the full coverage as usual. But I'm rotated into Bristol.
Very good. Well, thanks for joining us, mate. It's been great. Really appreciate it. Hopefully,
it's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure.
Hopefully, next time we speak, we'll be talking about a promoted Sunderland team. That would be nice, wouldn't it?
Listen. Why not? Why not? Let's be positive.
Why not?
Why not?
Exactly. I'm all about positivity. Cheers, Martin. Thanks for joining us, mate. It's been great.
Thank you very much.
As always. Cheers to the listeners. We've got a reaction pod up on the feeds from after the game me and Chris did, if you want to listen to that. We're also recording this afternoon with a Norwich fan, so that'll be out on Monday morning ahead of the game on Tuesday, and then we'll have a reaction pod and a review Wednesday. So loads coming up this week on the How We Are the podcast feeds and Rotor Report. So loads going up on the website, rotorreport.sbnation.com. Follow us across all of our social media channels. Thanks again, Phil. Cheers, Martin. Thanks to listeners. We'll catch you later.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.